Connor had a magnetic presence, effortlessly drawing people in. He spoke with smooth assurance, a man who knew how to sell not just cars, but illusions. When Tessa walked into the dealership to buy a used car, something she could have easily paid for in full, she chose instead to keep her financial reality hidden. Connor was immediately captivated by her quiet beauty. To him, she was unlike anyone else, modest, mysterious, and seemingly without entitlement. It intrigued him. They began dating, and within 6 months, were swept into a whirlwind romance that ended in a quick courthouse wedding. For a while, Tessa felt like she was living a dream. She truly believed Connor loved her for who she was, not for what she owned or what she might one day inherit. She held on to every moment. How he tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in a room full of noise. She memorized the way he said her name, the way he reached for her hand like it was second nature. Her heart, long shielded by caution and legacy, dared to beat with hope again. In his arms, she felt ordinary in the most extraordinary way a woman loved, not for her name, but for her laugh, her thoughts, her soul. She laughed at his jokes, admired his ambition, and felt protected in his arms. She let her guard down in ways she never had before, convinced she had finally found someone who saw her, not her lineage. For the first time, she didn't have to pretend. His touch felt genuine, his smile warm, and in those early days, she'd look at him and wonder if fate had finally handed her something real. When Tessa found out she was pregnant, Connor appeared thrilled, vowing to be a devoted provider and hands-on father. His salary wasn't remarkable, but he had big dreams, constantly talking about climbing the corporate ladder and achieving major success. He painted vivid pictures of future vacations, a bigger house, and private schools promises wrapped in charm, but built on nothing concrete. Tessa admired his determination and never once considered revealing her true wealth. She wanted their relationship to be grounded in something authentic. But after they got married, the illusion began to crack. Slowly at first, then all at once. Connor started making sarcastic comments about Tessa not contributing enough financially. He insisted she take on extra shifts at the bookstore and complained endlessly about rent and the rising costs of baby preparations. At the same time, he splurged on tailored suits, extravagant dinners with coworkers, and expensive weekend getaways masked as networking opportunities. Each receipt felt like a silent betrayal, a slap to the sacrifices she was quietly making. The receipts told stories he never explained. Yet, he nitpicked Tessa for every minor expense, from prenatal vitamins to the occasional pastry at her favorite cafe. Every criticism landed like a blow to her spirit, chipping away at the image of the man she thought she married. Worse, he began to withdraw, not just emotionally but physically. He came home late, avoided eye contact, and brushed off her concerns with patronizing comments. Tension in their cramped, one-bedroom apartment thickened as her pregnancy progressed. She made promises to herself and to him that she would support his ambitions no matter what. She held her belly some nights in the dark, whispering to her unborn child that everything would be okay, even when she wasn't sure she believed it herself. There were moments she cried in the bathroom quietly so he wouldn't hear, so no one would know just how afraid she was becoming. Meanwhile, she silently endured morning sickness, crushing fatigue, and a growing fear for what the future held. She wanted to believe in him, but the man she once admired was morphing into a stranger with each passing day. The breaking point came on a stormy night during her 6th month of pregnancy. Rain pounded against the windows as Connor stumbled in late for what he called a business dinner, reeking of alcohol and, worse, perfume. His tie was crooked, and his normally neat hair was disheveled. "What happened to you?" Tessa asked, her hand instinctively resting on her swollen belly. She reached out to help with his soaked jacket. "Don't touch me," Connor snapped, yanking his arm away. "You think you're so special just because you're pregnant? Like I owe you something now." "Connor, I don't understand," she said, her eyes welling with tears. "You smell like—" "Don't start, Tessa," he slurred, jabbing a finger at her. "I'm not in the mood for your whining. Do Do you have any idea how humiliating it is to be married to someone who can barely hold a basic job? How that makes me look to my coworkers. We're partners. She drew a shaky breath. I'm trying to save money. We're having a baby. Save money. He barked out a bitter, humorless laugh. What money? And now we got a baby on the way. Great. Just one more mouth to feed. His words hit her like a blow to the chest. What have you done for me lately, huh? I'm stuck in this shoebox apartment, footing all the bills, and you've never brought anything real to the table. Suddenly, Connor stormed across the room. He grabbed her suitcase, yanked open the closet, and began stuffing her clothes into it. Tessa stood frozen, horror and confusion churning inside her. Connor, what are you doing? I'm done, he said coldly. Get out of my life. I can't even stand to look at your face anymore. Please, she begged, her voice cracking. I'm pregnant. We need to talk. He zipped the suitcase shut, slammed it onto the floor, and shoved her roughly toward the front door. Her breath caught in her throat as she tried to plead one more time, but his eyes were cold, empty. There was no flicker of love left, only a chilling indifference that sliced deeper than rage ever could. In a desperate bid to protect herself and her unborn child, Tessa wrapped her arms around her belly as she stumbled out into the relentless downpour. Her suitcase came flying after her, landing hard on the wet pavement. The zipper split, scattering a tiny pair of baby booties into the rain. The door slammed shut behind her with a violence that rivaled the storm. Drenched and trembling, Tessa stood on the stoop, rain mingling with her tears. She had nowhere to go, no one, nothing except the life she had tried so hard to leave behind. Thunder growled above as she grabbed the suitcase with one hand, the other pressed protectively over her belly. Grief and rage churned within her, but beneath them, something new began to rise. Not just survival fire. A vow ignited in her chest. This would not be the end of her story. He thought she was weak, and his cruelty had just cost him everything. Turning her back on the apartment that once held her dreams, she stepped into the storm. One day, Connor would regret everything. Of that, she was sure. After Connor cast her out, Tessa found temporary shelter at a small roadside motel. In the silence of the room, the reality settled in with suffocating clarity. She was alone, pregnant, heartbroken, but she wasn't broke, and she wasn't powerless. Early the next morning, she reached for a phone number she had rarely used. Tessa, my dear, is that you? It was the voice of Martin Ellsworth, her mother's trusted attorney and confidant. Mr. Ellsworth, she said, her voice trembling. I need your help. He didn't ask questions. He just came. Within the hour, Martin arrived, his silver hair catching the early sunlight. My dear, he said quietly, his face etched with concern. I'd heard whispers that you married in secret. I hoped it brought you happiness. He threw me out, she said, her voice breaking. He doesn't even know who I really am. I never told him about my family, about the inheritance. Martin listened, his heart breaking for the woman tempered by betrayal. What do you want to do now? I need somewhere to stay, she said at last. I think I'm finally ready to step into the life my mother left behind. No more hiding. Within hours, Martin had discreetly moved her into a lavish penthouse in downtown Denver, a property that had belonged to her mother. As she stepped into the spacious living room, gazing at the sweeping city skyline, her breath caught. It's too much, she whispered. You own this place, Tessa, Martin said gently. Most importantly, it's safe. You deserve that now. Safe. The word felt foreign and warm all at once. Her hand moved to her belly. Tears filled her eyes, not from sorrow this time, but from sheer, overwhelming relief. She had a refuge. In the weeks that followed, Tessa acclimated to her new surroundings, turning one of the rooms into a nursery. Each brushstroke on the wall felt like a quiet act of healing. She wasn't just painting a room. She was creating space for a future, piece by piece. But word of her return had spread. Soon, her estranged father, Everett Whitaker, stood at her door. He was a tall, rigid man in a tailored suit, the confident gaze of a man used to running boardrooms. Hello, Tessa, he said, his voice calm and measured. His eyes flicked to her belly, a faint softness appearing on his stern face. "You're carrying my grandchild." "Yes, I am," she replied, a strange mixture of protectiveness and uncertainty rising within her. "I know I've never been the father you needed," he said slowly, "but I want you to know whatever you need, I'm here." Tessa remained cautious, but for her child's sake, she accepted. A fragile bridge began to form between them. In the midst of that emotional storm, she agreed to become more involved with Whitaker Industries. At her first board meeting, an older member, James Caldwell, approached her. "You speak with the same conviction your mother had," he said kindly. "It's good to have you here." His words stung her eyes with tears. She was no longer just surviving. She was building a legacy. Finally, the day arrived. After a long, grueling labor, with her friend Natalie and a watchful Everett by her side, a piercing cry filled the room. "It's a boy," the doctor announced. The nurse placed him in her arms, and in that moment, the world vanished. All that mattered was the fragile, precious life she held. She named him Theodore, Teddy for short, a name her mother had always loved. Weeks later, as Teddy slept peacefully, the intercom buzzed. It was Connor. He was in the lobby, making a scene, demanding to see her. A cold resolve settled over her. She was no longer the broken woman he had thrown away. She met him in the dimly lit lounge. He looked disheveled, a shadow of the confident man she once knew. "I heard you came into some money," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "And I heard you had the baby. I'm ready to be a father to our child." Her heart thundered with fury, not hope. "You don't even know your son's name," she said, her voice sharp as glass. "You forfeited your rights the night you threw me out into the cold. I'm a Whitaker. My son is a Whitaker heir. If you try anything, I will bury you in court." The bravado drained from his eyes. He saw it, then not the unassuming girl from the bookstore, but a woman forged in fire, backed by an empire. "This conversation is over," she said flatly. "If you have something else to say, send it through my lawyer." She turned and walked away without looking back, her spine straight, her spirit unbroken. Tessa threw herself into her philanthropic dream, the Lillian Whitaker Memorial Center, a sanctuary for young mothers. At the center's grand opening gala, a glittering event filled with Denver's elite, Connor made his final, desperate move. He crashed the party, pushing through the crowd, his eyes wild. "So this is it," he spat. "Your big revenge." Tessa faced him, poised and serene. "No, Connor. I'm just living my life." She then turned to the silent, watching crowd. "This man," she said, her voice clear and unwavering, "threw me into the street when I was 6 months pregnant. He called me worthless. Now, seeing what I've built, he wants sympathy." A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. Security escorted a sputtering Connor away, his protests fading into the night. Headlines of the showdown went viral, painting Tessa as a symbol of strength and survival. The subsequent custody battle was a formality. The court granted her full custody, denying Connor's request for visitation until he could prove significant and consistent rehabilitation. He never did. Word eventually reached Tessa that he had left Denver, a disgraced man who had lost everything. Years passed. The Lillian Whitaker Memorial Center became a beacon of hope, a nationally recognized model for community support. Teddy grew into a bright, joyful boy of 5, his laughter echoing in the penthouse that was now a warm and loving home. Tessa's relationship with Everett blossomed into one of deep, mutual respect and affection. He was no longer just a businessman. He was a doting grandfather who rarely missed a chance to read Teddy a bedtime story. One crisp autumn afternoon, Tessa stood on the playground behind the center, watching Teddy chase fallen leaves with a squeal of pure joy. The air was filled with the laughter of children and the gentle chatter of mothers who had found a community here, a sisterhood. She felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet joy she once thought impossible. "He's got your spirit," a warm voice said beside her. She turned to see Dr. Eris Thorne, a kind-eyed pediatrician who volunteered at the center. He was a single father himself, and they had bonded over shared stories and a mutual desire to make the world a little gentler. Tessa smiled. And his father's stubborn streak, I'm afraid. It was the first time she had mentioned Connor in years without a trace of pain, only a distant, matter-of-fact acknowledgement. Eris just nodded, his gaze soft and understanding. Sometimes, the best parts of us are forged in the hardest fires. As she watched her son, her father playing with him on the swings, and the gentle man standing beside her, Tessa knew her story had finally found its beautiful ending. It wasn't a story of revenge, but of reclamation. She had taken the broken pieces of her life and built not an empire of wealth, but a legacy of love. She was no longer a woman defined by betrayal, but the author of her own future, a future more radiant and real than any illusion. "We made it, baby boy," she whispered to Teddy across the playground, a tear of gratitude rolling down her cheek. "We really, truly did." Life doesn't always come with warnings. Sometimes it tears us apart, and yet we find strength not because we want to, but because we must. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Tessa did, and maybe, so can you. This story was about reclaiming identity, choosing healing over hate, and resilience over revenge. If you're standing in a storm as she once did, wondering if the pain has a purpose, know that it does. Your story isn't over. If this journey stirred something inside you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel. Because someone out there, maybe just like you, is waiting to hear this story. And always remember, healing isn't a destination. It's a daily choice to rise, even when it's hard. Thank you for staying with us. Until next time, stay strong.